Verifiable Codex. Ancient discoveries, modern revelations.
Ezekiel 37 calls the breath from the four winds. The meaning is simple and strong. Invite the life of God into places that have fallen silent. Now see a hidden floor breathe again, sunlight finding letters that waited 15 centuries. The room answering with a quiet yes. A desert storm slows itself to a careful hand, drawing a thin curtain of sand from a stone threshold, then letting light fall where it has not fallen in a lifetime. When dust settles, the silence is not empty, it is attentive, as if the room itself remembers a sentence and is relieved to speak it once more. The people who kneel there do not first reach for a camera, they reach for balance, because the floor under their knees makes a claim on them that a page cannot make. And the claim is this: let your bones agree with your mouth, let your posture agree with your prayer. Let the weight of your body testify that you trust this line with more than your thoughts. When scripture becomes a place, you do not only read it, you live inside it. And that changes how you stand in every other room. The room is modest, and that is not an apology, it is a promise. Because places built for presence, rather than performance, have always been the ones that carry us in hard years. The ceiling leans low to tame the echo. The lamps do not call attention to themselves. They honor the faces before them. The walls know how to keep heat out and keep quiet in. The floor, which is the heart of the house, is a mosaic assembled not for shine but for stamina. Small stones chosen to hold a single sentence without flinching, day after day, generation after generation. A page can be pocketed and passed and carried to a hospital or a prison or a school bus, and that is its unique and holy strength. A floor remains, even when you leave, and because it remains, it teaches you to remain. And remaining is how hearts recover from hurry. Set the discovery beside the vision, and the reasons deepen without theatrics. In the valley where the prophet stands, nothing pretends to be partially alive. There is no need for gentle euphemism. The bones announce the absence, and the dust confirms it. Yet the instruction given is not to diagnose until despair hardens. It is not to write a clever report. It is to speak. To speak to what cannot answer, because God is not embarrassed to begin with a word in the face of inability. Then to call the breath to enter what the word has reassembled, so that the order is preserved and the lesson is not lost. Namely, that sound can precede sight and noise can precede strength, and the faint rattle is not a footnote. It is the pledge that form is returning and fullness will not be wasted on what refuses order. People who learn to honor the first rattle do not chase spectacle, they cultivate steadiness. And steadiness is the soul's favorite climate. The timing feels like mercy held for an hour that would need something plain and strong. Because after years that thinned the rooms where we live, and stretched the corridors where we work, and tightened the sanctuaries where we pray, the last thing our bodies needed was a louder argument. They needed a clearer floor. The sentence in stone is not an idea performing for applause. It is a practice waiting for participants. And practices can feed you on ordinary Tuesdays in ways that events cannot. Because you can bring a practice into a kitchen and a hallway, and a waiting room, and a parking lot, and the sentence is as at home there as it is in a desert. Floors are not jealous of rooms. They teach rooms how to breathe. The brothers who set the line were making a theological confession and a practical plan at once, and that union is why their work survives storms and silence. The confession is that God gives breath and invites us to ask for it as if asking mattered. The plan is that human beings forget truth, unless it is placed where forgetting becomes unlikely, under the feet, in the place where balance returns when memory is tired. A page can be turned at will, a floor turns you. And the gentle authority of a floor is that it never raises its voice and never plaids. It simply holds and holds. And in that holding it outlasts our mood swings, and our news cycles and our talent for worrying everything into smaller pieces until nothing can be held. People with floors beneath them can carry others without breaking. Let the room's wisdom walk home with you, and it will teach a household to breathe without announcing a program. In the kitchen where clocks bully, and pots demand attention, and voices compete, a small card with a short line near the sink becomes a pattern that keeps a day from unraveling. And when spoken without theatrics, it does not draw attention to your spirituality, it draws attention to the space around the table. And space is the gift we forgot we needed, because lack of space is what wore us out more than lack of time. By the door where shoes collect, the sentence softens exits and returns, reminding feet they can carry peace with them and bring peace back. And in a child's room, the line becomes a familiar rhythm, folded into blankets and brushed into hair. A refrain that memory will keep even when understanding is late to class, which is all right, because understanding can be tutored by kindness. Carry the line to work without a trumpet and without an agenda for anyone else, because quiet arrangements change more hearts than announcements. A calendar note at the same hour each day can turn a desk into a small chapel, and a whispered line before a meeting can tame the invisible panic that prefers to pretend it is energy. And the result will not always be dramatic. That is exactly the point. The result will be human, and humans who regain their breath become less reactive and more responsive, which changes meetings more than new buzzwords do. Because cultures shift where oxygen returns, not where slogans multiply. Your team does not need you to be impressive. They need you to be present, and breath is how presence arrives. In a congregation, the sentence becomes a shared floor best of all, when no one tries to brand it. Let a faithful few hold the room for 5 minutes before anything else. Let them stand where the people will stand. Let them speak the line once. Let them wait through a silence long enough to stop the internal engines that hum in every late arrival. And then let them vanish into the congregation like salt into soup, and let no one clap for them. Because seasoning does its work best when no one stares at it. And churches that learn to love seasoning will feed more people more quietly, for longer than churches that only love spice. 5 quiet minutes, held by a sentence, and a few steady souls will do for the next hour what 30 minutes of hype cannot. Of course, critiques will come. They always do, because when something plain begins to heal, the enemy of simplicity searches for ways to make it seem either naive or manipulative. Some will say, this is too mystical, a retreat into atmosphere when we should be building more programs, forgetting that wind is not the opposite of mission, it is the power behind it. And others will say, this is too practical, not sufficiently grand, forgetting that a line spoken in a kitchen may carry more doctrine than a lecture when it is spoken with faith. Because doctrine is truest when it becomes diet, and diets are not events, they are daily bread. Flaws outlast criticism, and you can borrow that patience without becoming defensive, by continuing to do the simple thing with affection. So, how to begin? If the very ease of the act threatens to embarrass you, or if the habit of a hurried mind whispers that small things cannot matter, begin by placing the line where your eyes already land without strain. Speak it once in the morning with a calm mouth. Speak it once somewhere in the middle of your day, once near the end. Leave a pause after each speaking, as if you were leaving the door unlatched for a guest you trust. Then listen for small signs. The softening of a sentence that might have been sharp. The loosening of a jaw you did not know you clenched. The slowing of a reply that could have been too fast. The kind of small mercy that rarely becomes a story, but often prevents a wound. Do not demand feelings. Do not punish distraction. Do not count days like a judge. Count days like a gardener, and bless what grows. Invite one friend into the practice when you can, not to add pressure, but to add companionship. Walk a single loop of your block or your hallway and stop at corners. Speak the line without hurry. Leave a 10-breath pause, then move on. And at the end, go home without evaluating the prayer like a project. Do one small act of repair within the next few hours, and let no one know about it but the one who breathed. Because secrets kept in love become seeds that grow without your supervision. And people who learn to plant such seeds will discover they are living in a garden long before they thought. they had the tools. Shared breathing is how neighborhoods become less brittle. Keep a small notebook if you can bear it, not to build a case you will someday argue, but to teach your memory to be a friend when discouragement comes. Write the day, the line, one small sign, a sentence long at most. And when a month has passed, read backward and give thanks for mercies that never asked for a platform. Because gratitude is a better tonic for a weary mind than novelty, and gratitude is how repetition becomes strength, rather than boredom. Discouragement is a poor historian, and the notebook will help you disbelieve its pessimism without denying hard days. If fear of empty repetition returns, meet it with the truth that repetition is the scaffolding of human life. You eat by repetition, and live by repetition, and bless by repetition, and forgive by repetition, and breathe by repetition. And you do not apologize to your lungs for their lack of creativity. You thank them for their faithfulness. And then you ask God to make your mouth as faithful as your chest. The sentence is not a spell, it is a way to attend to reality. And attending to reality is the first kindness you can offer yourself and the people who must live with you. A word about repair is still needed, because the sentence is not designed to excuse us from action. It is designed to empower it without making action into an idol, and the difference between the two is the difference between peace and panic. If you call for breath in a marriage that has grown managerial, decide on one kindness that has nothing to do with logistics and everything to do with love. Do it without logging it, and see whether the air in the room changes before the week ends. If you call for breath in a church that has become excellent at mechanics and mediocre at mercy, find one person to encourage with no hope of return. Tell no one. Repeat as necessary. If you call for breath in a workplace that runs on adrenaline, embrace the slow courage of showing up on time, replying on time, apologizing on time, and leaving on time, which will make you the strangest kind of revolutionary, the kind whose rebellion is a blessing rather than a drama. Seasons will befriend or resist you, and you are to welcome both, because both are teachers. There will be mornings when the sentence feels like a deep well, and evenings when it feels like a stone. And both are holy, because wells train you to drink and stones train you to remain. And remaining is how roots grow, and roots are why storms sometimes look larger than they are, because storms cannot uproot what has learned to stay. The floor knows this, and if you stand on it long enough, you will know it too. Leaders will feel a special temptation to turn the sentence into a banner, and then measure compliance. But banners and measurements are not the tools this practice needs. What it needs from leaders is trust and consistency, and the refusal to make breath a brand. Because brands age and breath does not. Brands compete and breath does not. Brands demand loyalty and breath gives life. And life is more persuasive than loyalty. If you lead, become the quietest kind of convener, the kind who arrives early to stand on the line, the kind who asks a few trustworthy souls to hold the room without being seen, the kind who believes that yeast will do what engines cannot, given time. Your town may not want more religious words, and you should listen to that wariness with respect. But your town does want more oxygen than it currently has, and that is the opening, because sentences like this are not arguments, they are hospitality. And hospitality is almost always welcome, even in people who do not believe what you believe, provided you offer it without condescension, and without making your kindness into a sales pitch. If someone asks why you do what you do, answer as plainly as possible, and stop when you have said enough, because mystery does not need a lawyer. Remember the storm without canonizing it, because storms are servants, and servants do not make good kings. The wind that lifted the sand did not demand an audience, it simply obeyed. And you can analogize the obedience into your own life by remembering that many of the things which do the most good in a city happen without a microphone, a meeting, or a memo, and that you should major in those things if you wish to see your street become kinder than your newsfeed says it is. People who organize their day around oxygen and kindness become the kind of neighbors who are still useful when the power goes out. If you want to deepen the practice after you have begun, remain simple while becoming more specific. Choose 1 hour each week as a shared floor with your family or small group or team. Place the line underfoot using paper and humility. Speak it once, then keep a silence wide enough for naming valleys without explaining them. And after each naming, speak the line again. Then leave another silence for small signs. And do not worry if no sign is felt, because waiting without complaint is a sign that breath has already begun to change the climate within you. End with thanks, because thanks keeps the window open when the room would otherwise get stuffy with self-focus. During certain weeks, ask by name for breath to meet a neighbor, a classroom, a hospital wing, a business, a street. And then in the next few days perform one small, secret act of encouragement, because secrets in love are seeds that forgive you for not being in charge of growth. People who stop pretending to be in charge become better companions. And the city that collects such companions will outlast more famous plans by simply refusing to abandon the slow work. Slowness with love is not laziness, it is fidelity. By now the point has walked itself into your bones without a chart, and that is the only kind of point worth making in a life that already has enough charts. The sentence is a gift, the floor is a teacher, the storm is a servant, the work is a practice, and the fruit is a people who breathe when others hold their breath, who listen when others shout, who repair when others retreat, who endure without hardening, and who soften without collapsing. Nothing in that set requires a spotlight. Everything in that set requires breath. Let the ending be as simple as the beginning. Place the line where you can see it without strain. Speak it aloud in a calm voice. Leave a pause that welcomes what you cannot produce. Listen for the first small signs, the loosened jaw, the softer sentence, the slowed replies, the kinder eyes, the steadier step. If they do not come today, begin again tomorrow. If they come today, bless God for His accuracy and His kindness, and carry that blessing into the next hour quietly. Because quiet things travel farther than loud things when rooms are tired and people are thin. And fatigue is precisely where dishonesty finds a foothold. So keep your words honest, keep your pauses generous, and keep your expectations anchored in God's character rather than in your own performance. You are not auditioning for favor when you speak this line. You are answering favor that arrived before you asked. And the sooner your heart knows that, the steadier your breath will become in crowded places where attention is scarce. It will help, as you go, to remember the way embodied habits teach meaning over time, because the mind receives, the emotions respond, and the body remembers. When you let your feet stand on words as weighty as this sentence, you begin to carry those words in your gait. And that is not a metaphor for people who have practiced this, it is a description. The office corridor feels different when your step remembers peace. The checkout line feels different when your step remembers patience. The bedside feels different when your step remembers presence, and the sanctuary aisle feels different when your step remembers reverence without stiffness, tenderness without sentimentality. Bodies humble minds into honesty, and the floor humbles bodies into steadiness. And that chain of humility is the only chain that frees captives rather than binding them. Do not forget, either, that houses have their own weather, and that one of the reasons this sentence matters is that it changes the forecast. Kitchens that had grown stormy without rain become places where laughter returns, first in a corner, then across the table. Bedrooms that had grown wary become spaces where trust clears its throat. Hallways that had learned to echo with hurry begin to echo with singing, sometimes quiet, sometimes off, sometimes in a language that only children speak. When the breath returns, people look more like themselves, and houses remember the names. Not the names given by mail carriers and tax offices, but the names by which God calls them: friend, refuge, workshop, harbor. And for the first time in a long time, home feels like a plot of ground where heaven is not embarrassed to visit. In workplaces, the change is subtler and therefore more potent, because few adults have the courage to admit how much they want air. The calendar still stares, the deadlines still press, the inbox still replenishes itself with a mechanical indifference that no human ever asked for. But the people who carry the sentence into that environment stop, mistaking urgency for importance, and their speech makes room for others to think in sentences rather than in slogans. And the results are unpleasant for those who enjoy panic as a management strategy, but beautiful for those who wish to see excellence survive. Calm does not reduce passion, calm reveals it, because frenzy is often fear in a clever suit, and fear is an expensive counselor, whereas breath is generous. When you lead, keep choosing bread over fireworks, because people learn to trust you when their bodies can rest in spaces you curate. The 5 minutes of standing on a line before a service or a meeting is not wasted, it is invested. And the return is measured in decisions made without self-protection, and in words spoken without self-advertisement, and in confessions offered without humiliation, and in worship that does not confuse volume with adoration. It is not that loud is wrong and quiet is right. It is that breath must govern both. And when breath governs both, loud becomes honest and quiet becomes attentive. And rooms filled with honest, attentive people are rooms that are hard to manipulate and easy to bless. Critics will note, and not without cause, that many people have prayed for a long time without seeing the changes they hoped for. And this is not a moment for theory, it is a moment for solidarity, because disappointment is not cured by a sentence, it is companioned by a sentence. And many of the greatest graces in the Church were born by people who learned to pray into disappointment without turning prayer into magic. The floor is not a wand, it is a place to stand when lament lasts longer than you thought it could, and longer than you wanted it to. And in that standing you will learn that breath is not only for celebration, it is for endurance. And endurance is a kind of miracle that few people ask for and everyone respects when they see it. A house that breathes can cry without drowning. There is a way to talk about this with children, and with skeptics, and with strangers that honors their intelligence and their experience. You can say, I have decided to ask for the kind of help that I cannot make for myself, because I have discovered that I am not a factory. And my best days are not the ones when I did the most, but the ones when I love best, and I love best when I am not starving for breath. You can say, I used to be bored by short prayers, and now I am grateful for them, because short prayers make room for long friendships. And long friendships do the kind of healing that long speeches promise and cannot deliver. Cities learn to breathe through small acts repeated by ordinary people, and when a city finds its breath, it grows kinder in ways that statisticians cannot count and cynics cannot deny. Sirens still sound, but not as often, and when they sound, neighbors do not hide. And stores still close, but not as often, and when they close, the owners are not alone, and streets still argue, but not as cruelly. And when they argue, laughter returns sooner. If you think this is a dream, try it in your block with 5 friends for 6 months, and see whether reality is so fragile that it cannot bear kindness. Reality is stronger than we think, which is why unkindness has not yet broken it, and why kindness can still repair it. There is a sentence that precedes repair, like a key precedes a door, and the sentence you hold is that key. Use it without pride and without apology, and do not grow bored with it, because it is not long enough to impress your clever friends, and do not make it longer than it is to impress your pious friends. It is the work of a lifetime to keep a short prayer honest, and those who keep it honest become, over time, the kind of people whose presence steadies others in emergencies, not because they are heroes, but because they have practiced their breathing in ordinary hours. If fatigue tries to shame you for not doing more, tell fatigue that breath is what allows more to be done without harm. And if guilt tries to list 100 better projects, tell guilt that God is not hiring you to replace the wind. And if pride tries to turn a sentence into a trademark, tell pride that oxygen cannot be owned, and that sharing is how life stays alive. Everything in the kingdom works by gift. Everything outside the kingdom tries to work by grasping, and grasping is exhausting, and gifts are restful, and rest is where your best work grows. All of this is easier to sustain when you remember your elders who prayed in kitchens and on porches and in fields, without applause, and without microphones, and without any hope of an audience beyond the one who hears. Because they are the ones who taught us that long faith is possible in short sentences, and that slow love is stronger than fast anger, and that the most convincing sermons in any century are the ones preached by lives that did not make rooms nervous. If you have any such elders left, thank them with your voice, and if they have already gone, honor them with your imitation, because honoring what is holy is how the future stays human. Perhaps the most startling change, as you continue, will be the widening of your attention. Breath will teach you to notice people you once edited out of your day, not because they were bad, but because you were hurried. And you will find yourself asking the breath to meet the clerk who fumbled your order, the driver who cut you off, the teacher who looked tired, the neighbor who watered her plants at dawn, the child who sang nonsense on the sidewalk, the stranger who cried in a parked car. And you will discover that prayer is not an escape from the world. It is a way into it with a heart that is still soft enough to be good. When your attention widens, your world gets larger and your fear gets smaller, because fear thrives in narrow rooms. On certain days, you will feel as though this practice is accomplishing nothing, and those days are invitations to persevere rather than to pivot. Consider how a tree looks in winter, how stillness hides the work beneath the surface, how a trunk holds without applause, how roots drink quietly, how branches wait without trying to perform spring early, and let that be your model. Because every life has winters, and winter is not a punishment, it is a season in the rotation of grace. And the floor is a friend to winter, because floors do their best work when everything else is still. Do not despise stillness when it is sent by love. If the thought crosses your mind that the world is too broken for a sentence to help, answer it with the truth that the world is too broken to survive without one. Civilizations do not crumble because their policies are poorly written. They crumble because their people forget how to breathe together. And when breathing stops, speech becomes weapon, and work becomes war, and neighbors become enemies, and churches become brands. A sentence that returns breath to rooms is not a luxury, it is a linchpin. And it never asked for a trophy, it asked for a tongue and a pause and a will to learn. Do not be surprised that after a season of practice, other sentences will begin to heal too. Because breath makes room for speech that had sword to sweeten, and you will find that your thank you becomes specific again, and your I am sorry lands without qualifiers, and your I forgive you loses its need to lecture, and your I love you turns from a ritual into a meal. These are not small things. These are the pillars of houses that feed generations. You may worry that you are not eloquent enough to teach this to your children or your team, but eloquence is not the point, and brevity is not the point. Honesty is the point. And nothing teaches honesty like a sentence that refuses to change into a speech, a sentence that demands to be spoken plainly in rooms that know whether you are telling the truth. Children can tell, colleagues can tell, the sick can tell, the poor can tell, God can tell. Tell the truth and rest. As we move toward the last bend in this long path, remember how the story began, with a storm that lifted a thin veil of sand and let a flaw speak. Because beginnings are clues to endings in the hands of a God who writes without waste. The storm will not be the hero of every day, and the flaw will not be the surprise of every morning. But breath will remain the task and the gift, and your mouth will remain the door and the witness. Doors do their best work when they open, not when they advertise. Let the ending be as simple as the beginning. Place the line where you can see it without strain. Speak it aloud in a calm voice. Leave a pause that welcomes what you cannot produce. Listen for the first small signs, the loosened jaw, the softer sentence, the slowed replies, the kinder eyes, the steadier step. If they do not come today, begin again tomorrow. If they come today, bless God for his accuracy and his kindness, and carry that blessing into the next hour quietly, because quiet things travel farther than loud things when rooms are tired and people are thin. And fatigue is precisely where dishonesty finds a foothold. So keep your words honest, keep your pauses generous, and keep your expectations anchored in God's character rather than in your own performance. Comb from the four winds, breath of God, and meet the rooms where we live and the streets where we walk and the churches where we gather. Come to the places that feel finished without being fulfilled, and the minds that cannot rest even when the house is quiet. Come to the families that have learned caution without learning comfort, and the leaders who have plans but need presence. Make what is scattered align. Make what is brittle soften. Make what is merely form become alive. The floor has taught us how to stand. The Spirit will teach us how to move. And we will keep calling until our bones learn their work again. Now, listen for the faint sound that always comes first, not the trumpet of spectacle, not the drum of triumph, but the soft rattle that tells you the valley has heard you, and your bones remember their assignment, and the wind has not forgotten your street. When you hear it, call again with confidence, then hold your place with peace, because the breath that answers is never late, and the life that follows will not be small.